My name is Philip Westbrook. I started in sleep, I guess, from a very early age, but never thought of it as anything but recreation until much later. Went to undergraduate at Stanford and medical school at Stanford, rather reluctantly became a physician, and then did an internship at Walter Reed and further training in internal medicine and pulmonary disease at the Mayo Clinic. As a good California boy, once I spent a winter in Rochester, Minnesota, I said I wouldn't stay there if they gave me the place. But it turned out to be a good place to practice medicine and a place which finally allowed me to do something that I really was interested in, which turned out to be the relationship between sleep and the control of breathing. Now, I finished my fellowship in pulmonary medicine with a primary interest in pulmonary physiology, so much so that I really focused on that. And towards the end of my fellowship, became interested in physiology to the point where I spent most of my time in the pulmonary function laboratories. Ended up staying there pretty much. So I really ended up not practicing much in terms of pulmonary medicine, but mostly pulmonary physiology. As part of a research project, funded research project, I established a remote pulmonary function outreach program, which installed pulmonary function equipment in little hospitals around the Midwest and had their signals sent over the phone lines to Mayo, where we analyzed them and I could interpret the test for them. This actually worked well and taught me a lot about signal processing and stuff like that. It was, from one point of view, very successful. On the other hand, the business office at Mayo started accusing me of single-handedly trying to make Mayo a nonprofit institution. So we had to alter that program. I, at that point, then began to be interested in exercise physiology. We had a lab which did not do arterial blood gases. That was part of pathology. So with much hand-wringing and persuasion and threats, I finally took the outpatient arterial blood gas practice away from them. And as part of that, established what they call the Special Pulmonary Function Laboratory, which, with the addition of some other equipment and all, became a place where we could look at how pulmonary function tests could be applied to special problems. So that's the background of that. As most physicians at that time knew nothing about sleep. And again, I was back in the sleep is recreation, not an active brain. And so when my mentor and really good friend, Bob Hyatt, who was a world-class physiologist, returned from a trip to Europe and told me about a study by a French neurologist showing that people with the Pickwickian syndrome actually were falling asleep and they stopped breathing during sleep. And he and later Young and Kulo proved that it was the arousals from sleep to breathe that caused their daytime sleepiness. I was amazed. What? I said, I've never seen that. Of course I had, as had many of my colleagues, but we never put it together. So that was an eye-opener. And I thought I had to try to find one of these rare patients and see what was going on. So I think it was about 1973 that we finally identified a patient who, in my memory anyway, fell asleep during a pulmonary function test, which was a nitrogen washout test. In other words, breathing oxygen to wash out nitrogen, and fell asleep during that. Was spotted by an alert technician that happened because the mouthpiece fell out of their mouth as they fell asleep. We identified the patient and obtained the patient's permission to do further studies. Now, this was back in a time, remember, this is a long time ago. And so we didn't go through a lot of rigmarole about, permission and all that. We got a hold of the patient. He said, sure. And so with the help of Bob Hyatt and Joe Rodarty and some other really great physiologists and a very competent technical pulmonary staff, we got an old gurney, put it in the hallway outside my office in the pulmonary function lab, got two recorders. One was a thermal recorder, and the other was an old electronic recorder, both museum quality, borrowed from other projects and out of the storage cabinet. The technician I had at the time, Bill Sullivan, who was a lab supervisor of my lab, created a bias flow mask. I put down an esophageal balloon. We put in arterial lines and laid the patient down in the storeroom next to my office, which this was during the daytime. Very noisy, and the patient fell asleep. We started recording. We had borrowed a EEG technician from downstairs, from Frank Charborough. And sure enough, the patient fell asleep behaviorally. A few snores, stopped breathing, loud snorts. The technician looking at the EEG said he just woke up, and a few gasped and fell asleep again. So I thought, oh my gosh, this really does happen. Because we had the esophageal, we could tell that he was trying to breathe and couldn't. At the time, I thought, and I think everybody thought, this was a rare phenomenon. And indeed, after that first patient, which we treated the only way we knew how, we didn't see many patients for a few years. By the way, the treatment was tracheostomy in those days. And sure enough, it absolutely worked. And as a side, we had a number of patients who were farmers who would blow their corks out as they lifted bales of hay in their barn, sort of lick it and then put it back in. I don't know. So very few patients for a while. Then Kerry Olson, who was an ENT fellow, decided to look at the effects of, as part of his thesis work, decided to look at the effects of nasal breathing versus oral breathing during sleep and nasal obstruction. And and I was his thesis advisor on the sleep and breathing part. And that led to a lot of cooperation from the neurology department. And ultimately, Carrie and those studies we did showed that indeed humans have almost obligate nose breathing during sleep, and that the mouth is the high resistance pathway to breathing during sleep. And that was, that led me to one of my prizes that I had nothing to do with, essentially. Anyway, what it did was convince me that, yeah, there really is something to this, and that I had, and this was back in, I think, 76, 78, 79, something like that. I concluded that I needed to learn a lot more about sleep, and by that time I became aware that there were a few more patients than I had originally thought. Also, the critical thing at that time was that I somehow managed to wangle an invitation to the first meeting of the American Sleep Disorder Centers in Dallas, Texas. I'd never been to one of their meetings before, obviously. And I'm not sure how I got the invitation, but I did. And myself and one of my fellows went down. And it was a small meeting, as they were in those days, just maybe less than 50 people gathered in a room. And I had my fellow, Bruce Statz, present the results of our study of, I forget how many patients, as a matter of fact, doing daytime nap studies, most of them on a gurney outside my office. And the results of those and what we did with them and all. At the end of that presentation, I made a few remarks to try to associate myself with that study, and was called by a very famous sleep person, Ismet Karajan, a charlatan, literally, and that I should be escorted out of town as soon as possible. I should never be allowed in any of the meetings, that I was a disgrace to the profession and probably the human race. As accurate as that assessment might have been, it did kind of piss me off. And I decided that if any organization was that good that they couldn't allow me, I better try to join it. What I discovered was that there was no pathway to joining a structure, because this was an association of centers, not individuals. And we were obviously not a center. And the Sleep Research Society, you had to have some published research, quite a bit, to do that. And I didn't have any published research in sleep. Hell, I was trying to get into do that. To the rescue and to my everlasting gratitude came Bill Dement, who came up to me afterwards and said, you know, I'd like to talk to you more about this and your struggles, and would I serve on a committee of some sort? And I thought that was very kind, and as I am sure most of whoever is hearing this knows, Bill was a rather charismatic figure. Bill caught me at a time when I was not going, frankly, anywhere with my pulmonary physiology work. I was not a great scientist in that regard, and tended to find out things and then not write or publish anything about them. And I think this happened with some other now famous sleep docs who came from the pulmonary field. who were not famous in pulmonary, but here was this new opportunity. And I won't name any names, but because I'm not sure I'm correct. But it is interesting that I was very ready to sort of go from pulmonary, the American Thoracic Society, and American College of Physicians, the American College of Physicians, to really try to do something in sleep medicine. But as I mentioned, I think before, that there was no easy pathway for that. There was no pathway for clinical medicine practitioners such as myself, or really pulmonary physiologists such as myself, to join. I thought there should be. Now, also by coincidence at this time, Carol Westbrook and I had joined up again after many years of being in love, really. So she brought with her, when she came to join me in Minnesota, skills that I did not have, organizational skills and all. And I and she then together finally convinced Bill and a number of other people who really did not want to see this happen to start a place within the Academy, which is now the Academy, for individuals. The person that we worked with most closely on that was Howie Roffler. And Howie drove me nuts. He was really opposed to the idea that some, dirty clinicians could get in the pure research types organization. But ultimately, we worked it out. And I might mention subsequently, Howie became our very close friend. He was a wonderful guy. So with Carol's help, we started what was then the Clinical Sleep Society, and got some money from Bill, who was running, at least my memory. No, we didn't. No, this was back then. It was purely voluntary. Yes, the early days of the Clinical Sleep Society. The Clinical Sleep Society started because I saw a need, and with Carol's more than help, we managed to get it off the ground. Again, it wasn't without a considerable amount of discomfort from some old guard in the sleep community, but we were convinced to make it happen. I mean, we really got into this one to make it happen. Early on, the Clinical Sleep Society, the individual membership arm, I think now the major arm of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. So it was started in a farmhouse out in Elgin, Minnesota, where Carol and I bought our first computer and began to try to find people who would send in a few bucks to join this Clinical Sleep Society. And also we began to make brochures and things to distribute at other societies' meetings, including the American Academy of Neurology, or the American Neurological Association, whatever. And these pulmonary meetings, and later others, but to try to get membership. And we're tickled pink when we got, all the way up to 100 members. That was a major milestone and made me think that this was all worthwhile. The person who supported this pretty much, not monetarily, but didn't actively oppose us, was Bill. Now, he, I think, began to see this society as a competitor to him. And I will pat myself on the back for saying to him, no, we're not. It should be folded in to the existing society. We don't want to keep splintering off little groups that call themselves sleep societies. We should try to include everything that is possible. So, and Bill, I think, was relieved that he hadn't created a monster of a competitor to him, although, as a matter of fact, in a way, he may have. So we went on, and I don't know, I think you're going to interview Carol later, and she can tell you more about the growth of this society than I can. But for a couple of years, it was strictly voluntary. And Carol and I would lie awake at night trying to think how we can politically, answer the criticisms we might get from the establishment. We were finally successful in doing that. And finally, and Carol again can tell you more about this than I can, we got the administration of the society away from Stanford. And that was a biggie. Because at last we knew where money was going and what was happening, which we really hadn't known before. And sleep took off. I personally had to, sit for the examination of accredited polysomnographer, was it? What a strange name for somebody who, as though sleep was about looking at wiggly lines on paper. Of course, it is so much more. Well, first off, we tried to bring them together by convincing Bill DeMent and Stanford that we were not trying to push them apart. That was the first step, and I think I was successful in doing that. And so was Carol, finally. I think the other thing may have been the recognition that this was going to be a big part of the American Academy, the individual membership, and indeed might sort of take it over. And it was join or lose out. The other thing is that I think they saw in Carol a clearly competent administrator and full-time. And at this point, she'd volunteered, and was ready to stop doing that and try to get some remunerative position someplace. So I don't fully know how to answer your question. It came about because I realized that we needed to do that. That the clinic had no sort of uniform or place where patients coming and complaining about a potential sleep medicine problem could go. So I wrote a proposal to the Board of Governors asking for permission to start a sleep disorders center. That was approved. Prior to doing that, I had gone to neurology, psychiatry, and my own division of pulmonary medicine to obtain their permission. Now, pulmonary medicine was beginning to think maybe this was a lucrative proposition from having a sleep lab. And so they agreed. They kept the Sleep Disorder Center, which continues to be administratively under Division of Pulmonary Medicine, Thoracic Diseases at Mayo. And obviously this has proven to be a moneymaker, especially in the past. An interesting sidelight, can I just share? Early on, a lot of our patients came in sent by urology. And pretty soon, this became a major moneymaker for the Sleep Disorder Center. And I always thought it was nice revenge for Ismet Karajan, who had suggested that I stay out of medicine and off the planet. But we had, this just was interesting to have to train technicians to put on Peter meters and do all that sort of stuff. I got a volunteer from neurology who didn't stay with it. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name right now. And from psychiatry, Jerry Richardson joined us. In fact, Jerry and I took our board examinations together and both passed. Amazing. So that was the start. Others from pulmonary medicine joined as the laboratory grew. It outgrew its initial phase out at St. Mary's Hospital, where we had, I think, 3 beds, and where we performed the first CPAP study done in Minnesota. And that was also a dramatic event, thinking that we had a way of treating it after Colin Sullivan told us about it. We had a way of treating obstructive sleep apnea, which was the majority of our patients, without slitting their throat. Well, again, I'm going to refer most of these questions to Carol, because administratively, she was really in charge. I saw education of physicians and growing of the membership as to priorities, and sort of focused on that. I'm not sure that I had any loftier goals than that. Locally, for my Sleep Disorder Center, or Mayo Sleep Disorder Center, it was clear that no one we had was really focused on or terribly knowledgeable about treating insomnia as a primary complaint. And so searching about for someone who might fill that role, I found Peter Howry at Dartmouth. Now, Peter had been author of a free booklet put out by a drug company that for many of us first getting into it served as a textbook. And so it was already clear that Peter knew a lot, and he had trained at Chicago, and Peter knew a lot about it. And just so happened that when I approached Peter, he was interested. He came, visited us, and accepted a position and became the first PhD non-pulmonary guy in the thoracic division at Mayo as part of the Sleep Disorder Center. And I saw Peter as a long-term, person who would be of great benefit to us. Somewhat unfortunately, shortly after Peter arrived, I had to leave because of family things. But that was it. I also needed someone, I think, to more actively undertake a research program, and recruited John Shepard. I actively recruited John Shepard to come and start our research program, and also saw John as the MD replacement for me. I'm getting a little older. Yeah, okay, I became third president, because Bill wanted Howie Rothward to be the next president. Tom Roth did not want Howie Rothward to be the next president, for reasons I still am not sure about. But there was, I think, in retrospect, I think there was no love lost between Howie and Tom. So I guess I became the third one because I was, sort of the third party. My leadership was Bill Dement, and second in command was Bill Dement. Third in command was Bill Dement. For all his wonderful qualities, and believe me, I owe Bill so much. He was reluctant to let stuff go out of Stanford. I mean, it was, the Academy had been very good to Bill financially, I think, in other ways. But the writing was on the wall. I gave a speech, I think, in Seattle, and it, I think, finally convinced Bill that we were, the Clinical Sleep Society and its membership had to be accommodated fully. And perhaps that ultimately led to my being the third president of the Academy. I think it put sleep medicine back into the community of patients, taking care of patients, all patients, made sleep disorders a category that all physicians had to consider. So I think that was something that we were trying to accomplish, and I think we did, because every member of the Clinical Sleep Society, while not having to prove that they were anything other than, at that point, willing to send in their buck or two for the membership, were encouraged to take a examination and become a recognized, quote, specialist in sleep medicine. Now, at that time, it also, the other thing I think we were trying to do is get the accredited clinical polysomnography label changed to something that reflected the practice of sleep medicine, not the ability to read a polysomnogram. I think there was so little knowledge of sleep medicine than at that very point in time. Now, that wasn't later. Later, the major issue I wanted to address was the cost of the evaluation, which I thought needed to be changed. Now, that ultimately, and what I did there and accomplished was didn't make me a lot of friends within the sleep medicine community, but that needed to, that needed to be done. We needed to shift the focus from just laboratory medicine to overall clinical medicine, so that a general practitioner could take care of most sleep complaints and pay attention to them and have a knowledge base on which to practice. It was, I remember not too many years ago, you'd say sleep medicine, the what? People stop breathing during sleep, what? Sleep is not just rest, what? Things go on with the brain in sleep, what? That could have been me back not too many years ago. I think the American Academy of Sleep Medicine is the big tent. It is not, a neurology. It is not family practice. It is not pulmonary. It is not any single thing, but allows all kinds of practitioners in, even PhDs. This, I submit, makes it sort of within the field of people sleeping, like the American Medical Association. It is inclusive. And that's critically important if we're going to educate not only practitioners, but patients and the world about sleep, and making sure that we continue to get support for research. Think of what's happened to, think of narcolepsy today versus narcolepsy 5 years ago. What a marvelous, mostly a lot of it from Stanford, a lot of pathways to treatment that research has given to us. So I think the American Academy is very important and continues to be important, even though it really annoys me at times to see it so commercially focused. But that's true of so much in medicine. I don't want the American Academy to continue to try to sell me things. I want them to teach me things. A couple of things. I think I've been emphasizing the hard work and the negativity and the sometimes angry emotions that occurred during the development of the sleep societies and their unification. But I haven't emphasized how much fun it was as well. I think in my previous conversations, I've emphasized the pain and difficulty of starting the various sleep societies that ended up, and how uncomfortable it was, and sleepless nights and all the rest. What I failed to disclose is how much fun it was. That Carol and I had many a laughter over some of the things that happened, and we made such good friends that we otherwise would not have met. That came from different, from neurology and psychiatry and everything else. So these became our bedfellows, if you will, in sleep, and just was incredibly rewarding to us. And I think is one of the reasons that the American Academy is successful, that it brings together these physicians and researchers and from all these different ways of looking at the human body and its ailments, and tosses them together, and it's a great reward in and of itself. So we're pleased with that. One other thing I didn't mention that will go with me to my grave is a statement I made at the Banff conference put on by John Remmers, who was a great guy and a great researcher and a great opponent of starting the Clinical Sleep Society. Put on this conference, and as I remember it, I was one of the last, if not the last, speakers there, and I was talking about our experience with obstructive sleep apnea and its treatment with CPAP, and of course Sullivan was there as well, and so I was sort of kidding him and saying how great it was and thanking him for the use of his slides saying that. And I was, as usual, trying to inject some humor into my conversation. But also, at that time, I'd become aware that many situations or cases or phenomenon that had been labeled central sleep apnea were in truth obstructive, if you just looked at them carefully and noticed how they ended. And that these were people with, high loop gain and very unstable breathing. But basically, they may have stopped breathing centrally, but they started breathing obstructed. And it had just been missed. So the thing is that those are patients who, if you treat with CPAP, should improve and do. And that prompted my off-the-cuff statement, when in doubt, pressurize the snout. And that somehow got caught on, and I have been trying to live it down ever since. I've never had a chance to explain it. The reason for the Pickwick Club or the National Sleep Foundation separate from the Academy was that a foundation was a logical way to bring some revenue into the Academy that was not open to the Academy itself. And again, Carol was the driver behind this, pointing this out and saying, really what we needed to have was a foundation to help the Academy educate the public. And we did need that, and it would be the logical thing for a foundation to do. And by having a foundation, you could go to hotels that advertise their sleep mattresses or whatever, and take their money but use it for a good cause. The Academy couldn't do that. So that was logical for the Academy to support the start of a National Sleep Foundation, theoretically hands-off, but actually would take over something that was costing the Academy a lot of money and was a very important function of, if you will, we as sleep physicians. So that was one thing. The Pickwick Club reflected the idea that as physicians who are benefiting, sometimes outrageously so, from running sleep labs and all, that they should have a way of giving back to the Academy. And so the Pickwick Club became that mechanism, something for physicians or researchers or anybody who really wanted to could join the Pickwick Club. That money would go to the National Sleep Foundation, primarily to help do something that the Academy now didn't have to do, and it was costing the Academy. So it all made sense. The Pickwick Club was modeled in a way after something called the a physician's club at Mayo Clinic, where retired physicians, or really not retired physicians, could give part of their meager salary or benefits back to the clinic, and it was well supported. So I thought that was a good idea. And the Pickwick Club, I think actually, now that I remember, it came up in the meeting, I think it was Tom Roth that finally suggested that. And I remember Carol talking about her mother, who was an artist, having us color a drawing of the Pickwick, but also we designed little Pickwick buttons, which actually became collector's items later, and us trying to sell those at Carol and I trying to sell those at meetings. So that's where that all came from. Now, I'm disappointed that the ASDC started its own foundation. I don't understand why quite that happened, but it seems to me a something that I'm not surprised Jerry would do. The sleep codes ended up in neurology because there was no other place to put them, as far as I know. Now, why did they change sleep codes? Although it may seem to make a lot of sense now, it didn't make a lot of sense when you were running your own sleep lab and profiting from running an all-night EEG and all-night da-da, all-night da-da-da, and others separating them all out. Now, that couldn't have gone on. I mean, the government is not smart, but they're not that dumb. So they stopped that. They would have tried to crush it down to stop paying us one way or another. And they did, and that was as big a blow as my trying to shut down every sleep lab in the country.
Why did you try to shut down every sleep lab?
I was trying to shut down, I wasn't trying to shut down sleep labs. I've been accused of that. Well, I have been accused of trying to destroy sleep medicine practice, which is primarily sleep apnea laboratory practice, as far as money coming in goes. But that's not quite true. It just, at some point along the way, well, I've been accused of trying to ruin sleep medicine by shutting down laboratories. Not quite true. It just started to occur to me after running sleep laboratories of all sizes and places and things that much of what I was doing seemed to be a waste of time and money and effort. The diagnosing sleep apnea, the usual case of sleep apnea, was not difficult at all and could be done with portable monitoring. And at that point, I was working with Dan Lewandowski and Chris Burka at Advanced Brain Monitoring, who'd asked me to advise them on something else. And so I had access to engineering and technical expertise to create a portable monitor. And we created a portable monitoring system, designing much of it over a few glasses of wine at a dinner at our beach house. I really did think then and think now that much of what we did in the sleep laboratory clinically, which was sleep apnea, was a waste of money and time and effort and expertise. And and that the systems that I personally created, which I liked a lot, and the other systems that are out there, do a perfectly good job of answering the question, do you have trouble breathing during sleep, and is it obstructive or central, and da-da-da, and it can also now answer, is it restless legs? And also now we'll be able to answer, is this a REM sleep behavior disorder? So what we're doing with sleep, home sleep, self-applied monitors is just the beginning. And I think you realize it with these smartwatches and all this other stuff. You know, I'm not convinced that this is as good as an EEG, but EEGs can be easily applied. And as I may or may not have mentioned that we are now well on our ways to detecting REM sleep behavior disorder and actually using some of the signals from the brain to differentiate between, say, Lewy body disease and Alzheimer's. So it's just the beginning of portable monitoring. That, we started with sleep apnea because that was such an obvious one. Now, did that make me popular? No. I had my invitation to an APT conference canceled because I had told them that I was going to tell them that much of what they did was a waste of time and talent and money. They didn't like that. Probably still don't. But, there it is. Technicians go on. And it's important for us to realize as physicians what we're in this for. We're in this for patients. And if you're in it for money, I'm sorry, I think it's understandable and you deserve a good earning, but not immense wealth. One of the things I didn't mention was the pleasure one gets from teaching and training new physicians. And actually, my interlocutor today is an outstanding as that, Larry Epstein, who is a dear friend and a person that I am proud and rather humbled to say that I had a hand in his education.